Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Future Space 2021. I'm Clay Morey, Chair of the Future Space Leaders Foundation, and your host for today. We're so glad you've joined us for Future Space 2021. We have an exciting program of technology-focused discussions with experts lined up for you today. But first, I'd like to take a quick moment to reflect on why we're here. Future Space Leaders Foundation is a 100% volunteer, STEM-focused nonprofit dedicated to advancing the next generation of American space and satellite industry professionals. We provide grants to young professionals to present papers at international space conferences. And through the years, we've raised over $400,000 to support 53 grants for undergraduate students, graduate students, and young professionals. We're very proud of that accomplishment. And I'd like to give a shout out to the students and young professionals joining us virtually today from the Brooke Owens Fellowship, the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship, the Matthew I. Sokowitz Fellowship, Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, the Space Generation Advisory Council, and our newest class of 2021 Future Space Leaders. We're pleased to have you with us today, and we look forward to what you're going to accomplish in your careers in the space sector. Of course, today's event would not be possible without our sponsors and their dedication to providing young people with these important opportunities. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors, Advanced Space, Blue Origin, Bryce Tech, BWXT, the Commercial Space Progress Foundation, ComSpock, Hogan Levels, and Virgin Galactic. We appreciate your steadfast support to developing the next generation of space and satellite industry leaders. We'll start today with a sponsor video from Blue Origin.
I have one more thing we need to do before we depart. This is called a challenge coin. On the front, it says presented by crew member 7 for spaceflight on New Shepard. On the back, it says you are one of the first of millions of people living and working in space. So with that, the New Shepard 16 crew is go for launch.
History in the making. I can't believe it.
Our first panel discussion this morning, Rangers of the New Republic, will focus on national security space and is hosted by Future Space Leaders Foundation Board of Directors member Travis Langster from ComSpock. Travis, please take it away.
Thank you, Clay. And I also want to say thank you all for all that you do for the foundation. It's really great work. So I want to also thank our panelists. We have a very strong panel here with a very strong career in national security space and multidisciplinary experience here. Audrey Schaefer from the National Security Council, Space Policy Director, Dr. Jonathan Sartain, Chief Technology Officer from BWXT, and Chirag Parikh from Microsoft Azure Space Team. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to spend 1 to 2 minutes just describing the organization and their particular job responsibilities. And to kick things off, Audrey Schaefer, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Travis, and the entire Future Space Leaders team for inviting me to join today. So as you said, I'm the Director for Space Policy at the National Security Council, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Chirag Parikh actually had this job as well in the Obama administration, so he can also speak to it a little bit. So what that means is I'm the lead for national security space policy matters within the Executive Office of the President. That means I'm the lead for all space policy matters within the National Security Council, as well as advise the President and the National Security Advisor on military, intelligence, civil, as well as commercial space policies and strategies. But I don't do this alone. There's actually a big EOP team, a big White House team that deals with space. We have our National Space Council, which is in the process of standing up in this administration, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and the Office of Management and Budget, all of whom touch space in some way, shape, or form. And of course, all the departments and agencies who deal with space. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Audrey. Dr. Satane?
Good morning. Echo Audrey's gratitude for participation this morning. I'm looking forward to the discussion. BWXT, most notably, is the manufacturer of nuclear reactors for the U.S. Navy for submarines and aircraft carriers. But we also have contracts with NASA and the Department of Defense for the development of nuclear thermal propulsion systems for deep space transportation. We also make nuclear medicine products, radiopharmaceuticals, difficult word to pronounce there, to support the diagnostics and treatment of cancer. So a fairly broad portfolio within the corporation. Before joining BWXT, I was actually at NASA for about a decade as a heliophysicist, studying the plasma physics of the sun and developing rocket science payloads. So kind of a odd background for a nuclear engineer, but that's my background, and that's BWXT. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Chirag, who's made a special effort to be with us today.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Travis, Clay, and the broader Future Space Leaders team, and everybody listening to just the opportunity to speak. I did get an opportunity to speak, as Audrey said, several years ago when I was literally across the street from where I am right now, and the title of the session was A View from Pennsylvania Avenue, but it was in the House conference room on the Hill. But literally now you can see a view from Pennsylvania Avenue here. So I feel my mission accomplished there. So my name is Chirag Parikh. I spent 22 years in the federal government, intelligence community, as well as the Department of Defense and the White House, and recently, I moved a couple years ago over to Microsoft to start up their Azure space business, and Azure is Microsoft's cloud computing environment. And really what we're trying to do within Azure is, look, everybody knows how space is evolving, and every day, petabytes of data are being generated in space or transported through space. And having worked at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, where the responsibility of that cadre of analysts is to look at all the imagery coming down, it's just practically impossible to look at all the information being collected out there. And so what we're doing from a cloud and an IT company, what is Microsoft doing? I thought Microsoft is a business productivity, Windows, Office type of company. Well, we employ a lot of amazing data scientists, artificial intelligence specialists, developers, who are really developing capabilities to take a lot of that information, find that needle in the haystack, and also take care of the routine so we can actually focus on freeing up people's time from doing the mundane to allow them to focus on things that really require human cognition and reasoning. And in parallel, we have one of the largest privately owned fiber optic networks in the world. And so you think about, you can connect data on the ground, and you can connect data through LEO, MEO, and GEO. You bring all of that together with partnerships across the community, and that provides an opportunity to be able to bring that in. So we're bringing the power of a global enterprise and IT, state-of-the-art technology to the world of space, and it's like the happiest of two worlds. So again, thank you for having me, and looking forward to having a conversation with everybody.
Thank you, Chirag. So as you can tell, from space policy to nuclear physics to intelligence community, cloud computing, a very wide array of national security related type panelists that we have with us. So again, I want to ask one question for each of the panelists, starting with you, Audrey. What is the one thing, or what are the most important activities that this current generation of space professionals can do to attract and retain younger professionals to come into the space community? What are your thoughts there, Audrey?
Sure. Yeah. So it's funny. I don't actually think we have a problem attracting folks to the space industry. I think people think space is so cool and so exciting, and they want to find ways to get involved. I don't know that I would say we have a retention problem, but I think the problem that we have is actually somewhere between the two, of helping folks find their place, in the industry. And that's certainly something that I went through when I was in college, insofar as I studied engineering, but knew I didn't really want to be an engineer. And I had to figure out a way to stay in the space community without doing engineering, which I think is what most people just assume everyone in the space community does or is, as an engineer. But the fact of the matter is, space is, well, it's like a place, right? It's not, just one set of technologies, right? It's an entire sort of ecosystem, and everything from engineering to business to policy to law is sort of part of the space community. And so I think what we need to do is talk about how there are opportunities, no matter what sort of slice of it you're interested in, no matter what your major is in college or grad school, there's actually a home for you in the space community. You just need to sort of figure that out. And so I think what we can do is just talk more openly about all the different ways in which people can become involved in the space community.
That's wonderful. Dr. Sertain, what are your thoughts on this?
So like Audrey, I don't think that there's a lack of excitement to join the community, but from an engineering standpoint, I think one of the interesting ways to provide access to careers in the space industry is to give someone the opportunity to participate. And things like CubeSats have offered that kind of access to experiential learning at universities and even high schools that are offering a variety of different persons the opportunity to understand what career may exist for them in space. So a high school student today actually has the opportunity to use Arduino or other technologies to actually code the boards that would go into a CubeSat and then operate in space for some duration of time, be launched from the International Space Station. So these types of programs that provide that kind of access to opportunities then allow young students, either high school or in college, to explore what they would do. Again, back to Audrey's point, would they want to be an electrical engineer? Do they need systems engineering? Should they study data science to understand what data they would collect with their spacecraft? Do they need a degree in physics, or could they get a degree in radiation safety engineering? So I think that diversity of opportunities, allows more people to explore what they would do, given that there is a ongoing interest in participation in the space industry.
Thank you for that. And Chirac, you've certainly had a few different roles within the national security community. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I completely echo what the prior two panelists just said. I think there's just such enthusiasm to do space. There's an irony that when, a lot of us grew up, the place to go if you wanted to work space was NASA. And it's still a very important place where people want to go because it just has, it captures people's dreams and imaginations. But you think about some of the recent events that, both Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin just accomplished, and the things that SpaceX are accomplishing, startups. It's getting a lot of people want to just go and work in those sectors as well, straight up, not even do the government. And that's quite all right. I think the biggest challenge is not retaining and attracting young professionals into space. I think the biggest challenge is really about our STEM, K through 12 STEM world. How do we get people exposed to, particularly, of course, I have an affinity towards space STEM, but STEM in general. Most of the studies talk about the fact that, it's about elementary school, and that's when it was for me as well, where you kind of get that spark of imagination. I saw space shuttle launch on TV in elementary school. I'm like, yeah, that's my future. I'm not sure what, I wanted to be an astronaut, an astronomer, eventually got a degree as an aerospace engineer, but I'm in the space industry, and I can trace it all the way back to that launch. And I think really the area that all of us on the panel, the moderators, as well as everybody listening, is how do you reach out and get that maybe even not next generation, but next generation ready, so they can look back and say, yeah, this was the spark, because I saw these people go and do this amazing 4-minute, 0G trip up in space.
Thank you for that. I'm sure there are some visions and imagination sparked by the recent events from Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, certainly. Chirag, I want to stick with you. One other area in the younger workforce, what do you think are the challenges in growing a more diverse workforce in the space community?
Yeah, that's a great question, Travis, and you know, that's something that is well known, well appreciated. You know, there's been prior panels, I believe here at Future Space Leaders, but also other places where people talk about the power of the network. And for everybody listening, I mean, just the opportunity to be amongst your peers, to be able to have access to people who have had this type of experience in the industry is amazing. And credit to Future Space Leaders and all these other fellowships and scholarships that are bringing people together. That's great. And it's great that they're even focused on different types of minorities, whether we're talking about African American, female, Latino, so on and so forth. There's so many different opportunities. But the challenge is what I've particularly seen both in the government career as in Microsoft is they say, well, you know, use your network if there's an open position to bring people in. But the problem is because we've kind of been so immersed with, you know, more homogenous population, your network is often the same people. And so one of the challenges is going one or two layers deeper. You know, ask somebody, hey, are there scholarships, are there young professional opportunities like, you know, the Brooke Owens or the Patty Gray Smith efforts? Are there historically Black colleges, universities that I might go to? I may not have that direct knowledge because I've grown up in an industry that has kind of carried me along. But I think it takes a little bit more proactive effort than you would traditionally do to attract and, again, I don't think it's really a challenge to retain, but attract a more diverse workforce here. And I would tell you with absolute certainty, the more diverse workforce you have, not just from background and experience, but not from just experience, but also background in life, the far better your policies, your acquisitions, your operations, and your legislation, amongst other things, will be.
Certainly, I appreciate this, Chirag. I'm certainly a believer in diversity of thought. Okay, I want to go to the policy side. Back to you, Audrey. So we recognize that you're Space Policy Director, National Security Council, but can you tell us where does space and the priorities of space, where does that rank within the current administration?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. You know, I actually think, given everything going on, right, between pandemic, economic issues, whatever, I actually think it's in that context, space is ranked pretty high in the current administration. I think it's really significant that this administration chose to retain the National Space Council and to retain the vice president as its chair. I think that's a really significant symbol of and commitment that this administration has shown to space. And I think what you've seen, at least sort of informally, and what you'll see more formally over, you know, the coming weeks and months, when this administration really articulates its space policy priorities, are both a reflection of this administration's priorities more generally, you know, in space. So, for example, climate change, STEM education, workforce diversity, economic development, right? These are broader priorities of the administration that all have reflections in space, as well as, you know, space-specific priorities that I think are actually quite enduring across administrations and across political parties. Things like, you know, promoting our commercial space industry, advancing space exploration, you know, with our allies and partners, shaping international governance through norms of behavior, and actually an area that really was the last administration put some focus on, and this administration has continued, is in the area of cybersecurity for space systems, which is a growing challenge. So I think, frankly, I mean, I actually think space is ranking pretty high with this administration. I think you'll see more coming out as our Space Council gets more fully stood up.
That's wonderful here. As you might imagine, this organization is certainly interested in that type of prioritization for space. Let me turn over to Dr. Sertain. Just curious, can you give us a little bit, how does nuclear technology fit in the space community? Can you give us some insights there?
Sure. Our deepest asset in space, the NASA's most longest lived mission, Voyager, actually is a nuclear-powered vehicle. radioisotopic generators through their heat provide electrical energy for the Voyager spacecraft, and they've been operating since the 1970s. More broadly, for BWXT, certainly, nuclear power, fission, provides a much larger reservoir of energy. Access to space or the control of space, transportation within space requires power. The more power you have, the deeper you can travel, the longer you can travel, and maybe the more that you can do while in space. A nuclear thermal propulsion system, as an example, provides a substantial amount of thrust, but also can do so with a fairly efficient is a fairly efficient energy conversion source. So you can get people to Mars, as an example, in about half the time that you could if you were going to do so with a conventional rocket. So that access to space, the ability to transport materials or use power once there, those are the things that BWXT would provide or hopes to provide as the access to space, the needs in space grow. For the Artemis program, as an example, as we have our next humans on the moon, or as we explore Mars, the needs for power will grow. In situ resource utilization is going to require a significant amount of energy, conversion of water ice on the moon into hydrogen and oxygen for use for propellant or for humans to use for breathing and growing plants. That's going to require a substantial amount of power. So BWXT sees there being a variety of different things necessary for the infrastructure of space that are going to require power, either through propulsion or through electrical generation, and those are the types of contributions BWXT would make.
Thank you for that. There's a lot that requires power in terms of our space exploration. So a question for you, Dr. Stain, as well as Chirag. You've both had careers and responsibilities in government and industry. Can you compare and contrast? What are the, I wouldn't say best, but what are the different perspectives as having a job in the federal government as opposed to being in industry? Can you share insights for our younger professionals?
I'm happy to, go ahead, John. I'll go after you.
Sure. As a NASA civil servant, my responsibilities were dictated to me from the mission of the government. As a scientist, the National Academy set the priorities the nation wanted to address in terms of scientific questions that had to be answered, that needed to be answered. The combination of those two responsibilities kind of set the agenda for me. And so I fit within the community that dictated the questions to address and the prioritization of the missions to execute. As a civil servant also, it was my duty, actually taking an oath to serve the nation in the best way that I could. And the consequences of that led me into a variety of different opportunities that helped me grow my career. I think the other thing that I found as a NASA civil servant was access to mentors. Within the government, there's a broad array, a diverse group of people with a variety of different experiences, and from Robert Lightfoot, the former acting administrator, to astronauts that I was able to interact with, to scientists that I met. I was afforded the breadth of experiences that these different people had. And so being within the government offered me that breadth of opportunity, access to mentors, and also let me serve my nation, which I took a substantial amount of pride in. In commercial, it's very different. I work for the shareholder. They want to make money. That requires a different approach to doing my day job. But we also serve primarily the U.S. Navy in our company. So there's a dichotomy of interests, right? We have to do what's best for the Navy, but we also have to do that to the benefit of the shareholder. So the approach is different. And I find that diversity of approach, the difference in the way I have to act on a day-to-day basis and the goals that I have to achieve, I think that there's a different perspective that you have in doing that. And although the goals may be the same in the end, making products for the U.S. government, the manner in which you do that is a bit different. And I like the challenge. I like doing new and different things. So I find there's a very different attitude in commercial than there was in the government. But I'm very interested to see what Sharat has to say.
Who are you, Sharat?
Yeah, I reflect a lot of what you just said there. I mean, I'll be brief. I mean, I think, you brought up a term, and I'll just say this again to everybody. The term is mission. In the government, really, it comes down to it's mission, mission, mission. Particularly in the national security world, right? Where some of the missions can last just minutes long, and you have to have hours, weeks, months of prep in order to be able to do that. So it's really focused on that. Particularly, my entire industry experience, of course, revolves around Microsoft, so I have to put it from that optic. And what's really great is that a lot of their focus right now has been focused on mission, bringing in a lot of different government perspectives of former government employees to be able to help out with being able to provide that direction and focus. And yes, ultimately, you are beholden to the stock and to the shareholder, but it's been really great, the fact that they say, hey, let's, because of the size of the company, they have the ability to be able to flex and take risks. And so that's always great. I'd say also another great thing about working in the industry role, unlike the government role, is the speed at which you can get things accomplished. Anybody who's worked in the government world, whether you're working in policy or acquisition, there is a process, there is the churn. It's known, but you have to go through the system for legal reasons, for organizational reasons, and so on and so forth. Whereas in the private sector, if you got a great idea and you convinced your first level supervisor that it's a great idea, you got a month to put it together, bring the team together, do a demo, and push it out. And it moves fast. You get the people, you get the resources, you get the authorization, and the bottom line is whether or not it succeeds on the back end there, as opposed to checking off all the boxes along the way. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to have that kind of trust and just go off and, there's a term that they use both in the government as well as in the private sector, which is, fail fast, fail forward. Even if it doesn't succeed, let's learn from that, and then let's try, a different thing. It's really the scientific method. You had a hypothesis, and your conclusion might not have been exactly what you expected. Now, I'd say in the government, the best thing about the government, the thing I miss a lot about the government, is the ability to bend the arc of history. You don't get to sit at the table when you're in the private sector or in a think tank. You get to influence people who do that, and that's great, and that's important. But when you're in the government, you as a 20-something, 30-something, and beyond, 40, 50, 60, 70s even, you're making the decision. You're making that final decision. Yes, you have a boss, but you get to be at the table to make that decision. And you really get to do that from beginning of your career to the end. And being on the inside to know what's going on, to have access to all the information, to be able to have the access to decision-making is pretty remarkable, that sometimes you cannot always get on the outside looking in, particularly if you're on the outside trying to do government type of work there.
Really, really great insights from this very experienced panel here, so appreciate those. Audrey, I want to come back to you. One of the things I learned in my early years of my career, aerospace engineering by education, but the technical know-how doesn't always drive the course of actions or the decisions, types of things that Sharat was just speaking to. So from your vantage point, what drives decisions within the government? Is it policy? Is it technology? Is it something else? Well, how would you address that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Travis, because it's all of the above. When you make decisions in the government context, first of all, it sort of depends a little bit on the type of decision that you're making, right? If you're making an acquisition decision, you'll have certain criteria, cost and performance, schedule are sort of the typical axes, right? But when you're making a policy decision, it can be pretty complicated. Everything from what's in the best interest of the nation, which is fuzzy, right, to what are the political dimensions, both here at home as well as abroad from a foreign policy perspective, and like Sharat said, what is sort of the long-term impact of what you're going to do? Making a decision on a policy matter shouldn't just be about, today or tomorrow, but about what's the right policy for the nation over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And part of that is because policy can move slow. I mean, Chirag's right about that. Government definitely moves slower. But policy is sort of a deliberative process, kind of on purpose, because of that sort of longer term impact. So I don't have like a clear, crisp answer for you. I mean, frankly, I think most of the time we muddle along, and we hope to get the right, sort of incremental decision. And I think we do. We bend that arc, we bend it slowly, but surely, in the right direction over time. And I mean, honestly, I think that's the best we can hope for, sort of on a day-to-day basis. It's like sort of small steps that over time really do lead to significant change.
Thank you for that. So in the last minute that we have here, I'm going to turn to you, Jonathan. From a technology perspective, how would you describe the most important ingredients to robust innovation?
Well, Chirag said it earlier, you have to have a lack of fear for failure, right? You have to not be scared to take some chances. But I think another thing that's really critical for that is you need a plan. You can't just randomly go and start doing things. You have to do your research. You have to think about it from a variety of different perspectives. You have to understand the problem well and the opportunities to solve it. Once you have some background associated with your understanding, once you've really got your arms wrapped around the problem, you can start thinking through the solution. And that then requires a plan. I think that in my experiences and all the different things that I've attempted in throughout my career and watched others attempt, great ideas don't get you very far without a really good, solid plan. So innovation really does start with a good idea, but then you have to have a plan, and you've got to really want to execute that plan despite the possibility that you might fail. It's the combination of those things, I think, that really are going to get you from that good idea to that breakthrough disruptive technology. So it's a hard challenge to solve in some cases because the problems are so complex these days. But I think even complex problems with the right plan can be solved.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And with that, we'll close our panel here. I just want to say thank you to our panelists here. And I know, as a moderator, I've certainly taken some notes from the insights that you've shared with us, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Travis, Jonathan, Chirag, and Audrey, for that interesting discussion on national security, space, and technologies. It's good to know we have space rangers like yourselves keeping the galaxy safe for exploration and commercial development. Just getting set up here in the studio, and it's now my pleasure to introduce Jackie Cortese from Blue Origin. Jackie has now joined us to serve on the Future Space Leaders Board of Directors, and she leads government affairs efforts for Blue Origin here in Washington, D.C. Jackie, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Clay. It's great to be here. We're so excited to have Congresswoman Young Kim with us today. Congresswoman Kim was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 2020, representing the 39th District of California, and she is one of the first Korean American women ever to serve in Congress. Born in South Korea, she spent her childhood in Seoul before she and her family immigrated to the United States. Prior to joining Congress, Representative Kim was the first ever Korean American Republican woman to serve in the California State Assembly. In the House of Representatives, she is on several important committees, including small business, foreign affairs, and of course, the committee nearest and dearest to our hearts here, science, space, and technology. Representative Kim is a champion for STEM education and ensuring that students of all backgrounds have access to STEM opportunities. Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I want to start by thanking you and Mr. Jeff Bezos of Blue Origin for inviting me to participate in your annual event for the Future Space Leaders Foundation. I'm really honored to join you all today. I was online to listen to the previous panel discussing it. I was really, really happy to hear that there were a lot of emphasis on encouraging our future generation, especially those students in K through 12, to be interested in our space exploration program. And I also read the mission statement of your foundation. So I want to say that I wholeheartedly support the mission of your foundation. And I appreciate all the work that you do, because what you're doing is critical to ensuring our next generation of professionals to be interested in the space and satellite industry. I also want to begin by offering my special thanks to all the sponsors who make it possible for graduate students and young professionals to attend space industry symposiums that help them advance in their careers. You know, one thing that you didn't mention, Jackie, is that I'm a mother of 4 children. 3 of them are girls. And so I'm particularly appreciative of your partnership with various organizations and foundations, like the Brooke Owens Fellowship Program for inspiring college undergrad women to pursue careers in space and aviation. So today, let me take a few minutes to discuss how targeted investments in our STEM education can help increase our competitiveness abroad and foster innovation here at home and incentivize job growth across different sectors in our economy. As a member serving on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and also on the subcommittee on space, I am really, I like to discuss some of my efforts to ensure that we increase STEM education interest among our pre-K through 12th grade students, especially with young girls and students from underprivileged communities. Prior to COVID-19, only 23% of women who earn STEM degrees stayed in STEM careers. You know, we can only imagine how COVID-19, the lockdown and the subsequent closure of schools and daycares have increased the challenges for women in STEM education. Engaging more women in STEM studies and careers is essential to American competitiveness. And women make up half of the workforce, but they account for less than 25% of America's STEM workforce. You know, we cannot afford to compete in the 21st century economy with one hand tied behind our back. So if we do not take steps to support the next generation of students in STEM, in particular women, we will be doing long-term damage to our pool of researchers, engineers, and scientists. Today, as you know already, China awards more bachelor's degrees in science and engineering than the United States, the European Union, and Japan all combined. Fortunately, the United States Congress is taking steps in the right direction to address our educational deficiencies in a bipartisan way. Last month, the House passed a bipartisan bill, the National Science Foundation for the Future Act. And this will invest in our country's future through targeted investments in research and innovation in K through 12 STEM education. And in that larger legislation, I was able to attach my piece of legislation, the Innovations in Informal STEM Learning Act, to that bigger package. And my legislation established a National Science Foundation Informal STEM education program for students in pre-K through 8th grade. Under that legislation, the NSF director would award competitive merit-reviewed grants that support students' participation in competitions, after-school activities, and field experiences related to STEM education. That legislation is so important because we will be providing additional resources to keep students engaged in STEM education outside of the classrooms. And so I look forward to working with you all to advance STEM education and give our children the opportunity to become the next astronaut or rover engineer, scientist, so and so forth. So again, I want to thank you for having me this morning, and I'm happy to take a question or two for the remaining time that we have together.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Kim. We're so happy to have you where you are in Congress and on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. I think, you mentioned this earlier, the space industry is growing at an unprecedented rate, and there are a ton of opportunities for young people right now. How do you think, you lead a large district, how do you think the space industry can best outreach to students in your district, get them excited about the opportunities that space has to offer? No one knows the district better than you, so we really want to make an impact in districts like yours and nationwide. So how do you think we can do that in maybe some new and innovative ways?
First of all, I want to say that I am very happy to support any group that offer STEM-related events. I'm a big proponent of robotics competition as well as math and science competitions, and those happen throughout my district, and I've been excited to be able to actually attend some of their events. So I saw firsthand how the students are using their creativity and innovative ideas into action. So by supporting these events and helping to promote them, as a member of Congress, we promote those events throughout, my social media, and by having my staff and myself participate in those too. I think we can create an environment where students and the community in general can take more interest in STEM. I also want you to know that I'm serving as a co-chair for the Congressional App Challenge this year. So some of you who may not be familiar with this, the App Challenge is a fun opportunity for students, and it also has long-term benefits of allowing our future workforce to learn the coding skills and think about the ways to use technology to improve our lives. So it's definitely a win-win. And I would also encourage internships at local, aerospace companies. There are many of them in my district, and also, ask through your school internship program coordinators about the companies that are available in your area that offer student internship programs. For example, I raised my 4 children in the North Orange County city of Fullerton, and they all attended Troy High School. And the school has a Troy Tech program that emphasizes internship program and require every student in the program to complete 150 hours of internship. That's part of like one class for the credit that they need to get. So I've been fortunate to represent a district that is home to many suppliers that work closely with SpaceX, for example, that are working on space programs like Artemis. So I think these are some of the ways that we can encourage and create an environment for students to take interest in this STEM field.
Well, Congresswoman, I know you're on a tight timeline, and we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here with us today. We're so appreciative, and I can speak on behalf of Blue Origin, but also for all of the companies and young professionals here today that we really look forward to working with you as a partner on Capitol Hill. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jackie, and a big thank you to Representative Kim for joining us and for your steadfast support of the next generation of space professionals. We appreciate your thoughts and inspirational words to our future leaders. Now, a quick word from one of our sponsors, BWXT, who is developing propulsion technologies to power future NASA interplanetary missions.
At BWX Technologies, our high standards of safety, quality, and innovation are unwavering as we pursue our vision of employing nuclear technology to solve some of the world's most important problems. Headquartered in Lynchburg, Virginia, BWXT provides nuclear solutions for advanced nuclear designs, national security, clean energy, environmental remediation, nuclear medicine, and space exploration. We operate 12 sites in the U.S. and Canada, and through joint ventures, provide management and operations at more than a dozen U.S. Department of Energy and NASA facilities. Our commitment to improving products, processes, and business results is driven by continuous innovation. We consistently demonstrate our ability to evolve as emerging demands for advanced nuclear technologies materialize. BWXT is one of the largest and most diverse nuclear fuel producers in the world and is a proven leader in the handling and processing of uranium-bearing material for advanced nuclear power applications. We are the only U.S. company to manufacture irradiated-tested uranium oxycarbide TRISO fuel using production-scale equipment. Our TRISO production facility is currently licensed to produce this type of high-assay, low-enriched uranium fuel, and we are expanding our TRISO line to manufacture larger quantities of TRISO for the Department of Defense and fuels for innovative government and commercial programs. BWXT has worked with the Department of Energy in support of TRISO-based fuel development and qualification for more than 15 years. Over the past decade, there has been a reduction in the accessibility of radioisotopes. With our partners, we are making significant progress toward the production of Moly-99, a much-needed medical isotope used in over 40 million procedures a year to detect cancers and diagnose various medical conditions. This new, reliable supply will allow for more stable access to medical isotopes and will support hospitals and clinicians in providing better patient care. BWXT continues working with NASA in support of the design and development of the agency's Nuclear Thermal Propulsion Project. We are responsible for providing nuclear design and analysis, reactor fabrication development, and fuel design and supply in support of a future crewed mission to Mars.
When we plant that American flag on Mars, it is very likely that that mission is going to go through Lynchburg, Virginia, because of BWXT. Now, when we talk about what it takes to get to Mars, we're talking about the idea that we need nuclear propulsion.
For decades, the idea of journeying to the Red Planet has fascinated humanity. We are working to help make that vision a reality. To learn more about what we do, please visit us at www.bwxt.com.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Dylan Taylor, Chairman and CEO of Voyager Space Holdings, a multinational space holding firm that acquires and integrates leading space exploration enterprises. Dylan is also the founder of Space for Humanity, a nonprofit organizing a citizen astronaut program to experience the overview effect. Dylan is a true thought leader on financial aspects of space industry dynamics. He's a regular guest on CNBC, Fox Business, and Bloomberg, where he shares his views on the future of the space economy. Dylan, what's on your mind today?
Well, thanks, Clay. Honored to be here. Super excited to present a few thoughts, a few musings, if I can call them that. What's on my mind is really enabling ambition in the industry. And the thought is that, unfortunately, most of the capability in the industry resides in the hands of companies that might not be particularly ambitious, and most of the ambition resides in the hands of companies that aren't particularly capable. So how as an industry can we marry those two concepts? But a couple of other thoughts that I'd just love to engage the audience with is, why does space matter? Why are we doing this? We're trying to solve some very difficult problems, physics problems and the like, but why are we doing this? What's the fundamental why behind what we're doing? And I think for folks, there are different answers, right? I think one element is this notion of exploration, as we saw with Jeff and Richard and some of the pioneering acts for the last couple of weeks. So what's over the hill? I think that's a fundamentally human question. Also, certainly there's a financial element to this, right? The promise of gain, the promise of more resources, the promise of growing the pie, if you will. For me, just to share my thoughts on why space matters, I think it's a new paradigm. I think it inspires us. It allows us to reimagine what the best version of humanity can be. And so to me, it's a canvas that we can kind of paint our future ambitions on. And when I say ambitions, I'm talking about being a better version of what humans can be. I also think that space fundamentally represents the best of us, and it embodies a more hopeful future. And I think this world needs hope. It needs inspiration. And so for me, that's really what motivates me. That's my why. And, there's a famous quote from Viktor Frankl. For those of you who read the book, Man's Search for Meaning, one of the best books written in my view. But the quote is, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. So we all have careers. We all have kind of have-to-dos in our lives. Some of that is fun. Some of it's not. But I think fundamentally focus on your why. That would be my advice to all of you in the audience, because I think that's the rocket fuel. It's the why that's going to drive you through your career. And so I would just compel you to ask that question, reflect on that. And you're in a quiet moment, you're on a walk, you're on a run, you're meditating, whatever you're doing, focus on what your why is. A couple other thoughts, Clay, just if I might, while I have the mic here. We're fundamentally disrupting the industry right now. And I think we all feel that and know that. But just a few sort of outside observations on what I hear from people outside the industry. And I think it all starts with this notion that we've been throwing airplanes away for 50 years, right? And we're re-landing rockets. I know Blue had a big announcement yesterday on a heavy lift reusable vehicle. Obviously, SpaceX with their Falcon Heavy have already pulled off this trick. But people outside the industry are astonished by this. To them, it's science fiction becoming science fact. And we've really built the elevator. We've really unlocked the ability to get mass to orbit. So that's fundamentally disrupting things. The other thing which we know well, we've seen it in the last few weeks here, is we are fundamentally disrupting who can go to space, how frequently we can go to space. And this has really got people outside the industry buzzing. These numbers sort of are a little bit controversial in terms of where you define space, but we had 591 by my estimation. That number has now changed just in the past few weeks, as we know, and is fundamentally going to change and accelerate going into the future as well. And just for context, I think we're all space fans. We probably know this, but of that 598, there's only been 24 deep enough in space to actually see the Earth floating against the blackness of the sky, and only 12 have walked on the moon. When you think about 110 billion people who have ever lived, we are fundamentally disrupting our ability to get out of the fishbowl and reflect on what it means to be human, what it means to live on the Earth, what it means to be in this all together. So I think space, which has always been a tool for transformation, is going to fundamentally accelerate as we open up the high frontier. And again, these numbers bounce around, but you're more likely to be an astronaut, or I'm sorry, a billionaire or a Nobel Prize winner than an astronaut. I mean, that's how rare that's been, and I think that's going to change dramatically. And we all know what's happened with Virgin, and of course, what's happened with Blue here recently. And both architectures are elegant in their own way. Some people prefer sort of the rocket experience, other people maybe the more space plane experience, but I think both have their merits. So let's talk a little bit about kind of final thoughts, Clay. What's happening on the disruption side? One point I just want to make to folks, this is a fundamental piece that I'm not sure people fully understand. Disruption happens typically 98% of the time from the bottom up. So it's always low quality use cases. And this is why the big players always kind of look down their nose at the disruptors. They kind of pat them on the head and they say, nice little small company. And it's because they're eating away at the very bottom of the market. But as they gain share, as they gain capability, and as they gain credibility, they ultimately reach a point where the entire market flips. The upstart is still not as good as the established solution, but it's dramatically faster, it's dramatically cheaper, and people end up switching. And then the entire market reverts. And then, of course, the cycle repeats anew. So look for this in our industry. Look for this in your own companies that you might work for. And I think this is fundamentally going to be a theme for the next 10, 15, 20 years in the industry. This is just a graph. I've shown this to a few of you before, but this is PC sales versus smartphone sales. And again, if I would have told you, for those of you old enough to remember this, that the iPhone released in 2009 was going to disrupt the PC computer on your desktop, or the Pentax camera that you buy at Wolf Video for $500, you would have said I was crazy. And of course, that's what's happened. And the iPhone and the Android have disrupted even more than that, as we know. So what's holding us back? Just some final thoughts here. What do we need to do as an industry to further accelerate this sea change that we have going on? I call them the four horsemen of space finance. They're really sort of barriers for most investors to deploy real capital into space. One is illiquidity. The notion here is we don't have enough public companies yet. I think that's changing. Second is the perceived risk, technical and otherwise. Third would be high capital expenditures required to actually pull off these projects. And the fourth would be long time horizons. I've got some thoughts on all four of those. Here's just a quick graph, just for context, that fundamentally with the company, what you're trying to do is de-risk it. So that red line is just showing risk reduce over time. The issue is typically to de-risk, you need capital. In other words, you've got to hit milestones. So those things are pushing and pulling in opposite directions. So that's really typically what's called the valley of death. And our industry really was blocked at that early stage for many years. And I think around 2009, 2010, many people were focused on that early stage, spent a lot of time trying to solve that. I think we've solved it largely. And now we're a bit blocked kind of in this later stage. How do we get more high quality public companies? How do we get more exits? I think that's the next issue. And I think it's all about building scale. And that's part of what Voyager Space is trying to do, trying to solve that scale issue in the industry. So just final thoughts, conclusion, space is both risky and illiquid. At least that's the perception. Time horizons are long and CapEx is high. Good news is the returns are high, right? If you're successful, as we've seen with many companies, that the back-end returns are extremely high. And what I think we need as an industry is more collaboration. And what specifically do I mean by that? We need more industry standards. We need to align around more solutions that we can all kind of adapt to and design to. We need to minimize the chest pounding and the people, the companies saying they're going to, defy the laws of physics, and ultimately they flame out. That hurts all of us. We need to build more scale, and we need more success stories. Success stories being technical solutions that work, but also financial exits. And I think if we do that, I think we're on our way here. And again, just the final thought that I started with: companies with the capability oftentimes lack the ambition. Companies with the ambition oftentimes lack the capability. And we really need, as an industry, to create companies that have both of those things. And then just final thought is, don't forget this question. What is your why? Really reflect on this, because this will make you unstoppable if you answer this question. So with that, Clay, back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan, for your insights. And now a fan favorite. Our next is a discussion with experts from the commercial satellite industry on what's happening with large constellations of broadband satellites connecting the globe. Our good friend and board member Carissa Christensen is moderating this session. Take it away, Carissa.
Thank you, Clay. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today and to continue our series on wicked cool technologies. And really, this is a little bit of a milestone panel. We've been having a conversation about emergent technologies and the changing industry. That conversation has been largely shaped by the emergence of small satellite, large constellations. And we've had many discussions at Future Space Leaders about these concepts and what they might mean. And today, we are going to talk about these constellations and what they are doing. So we're really seeing these ideas come to fruition. The panel we have today could not be better suited for the topic. We've got with us Patricia Cooper. Patricia is the former vice president for satellite government affairs at SpaceX and the former president of the Satellite Industry Association, deeply knowledgeable about all aspects of the industry. We have Jerry Jansen, the director of Telesat Government Services. And Telesat, of course, is quite interesting in that it is a geo operator as well as a company that is exploring a LEO system. And we have very kindly joining us from London today, Chris McLaughlin, the Chief of Government Regulation and Engagement at OneWeb, who is helping OneWeb navigate the exciting and complex environment in which it operates, where it has the UK government as an investor, as well as investors around the globe. And the last time Chris and I were on a panel together, we had fun doing a radio show in the UK for the BBC. So I'm delighted to have all three of you here today. And I'll start with the question of, if you can each provide a quick overview of what you see new LEO constellations offering in terms of telecom, and what will be the biggest impact? Why do they matter? And Patricia, if you could kick us off.
Thanks, Carissa. It's great to join this conversation. I can't think of a more lively and inventive time to talk about space and specifically constellations. The most exciting thing that's happening with constellations right now is that they are happening. We've had 2 generations of satellite constellation innovation that produced, I think mixed results in the first round, and I think 1 satellite in the second round. So we've got thousands of satellites in space, more coming. More importantly, I think we've got a really clear target deliverable. We've got a very clear idea of what's missing in the world that LEO constellations are well suited to provide, and that is internet. There's no one in the world who would say that the internet is a frivolous target service after the year we had last year. The International Telecom Union estimates that about 3.7 billion people weren't connected to the internet last year, and therefore aren't able to take advantage of learning, working from home, building businesses, staying safe, protecting their homes and countries. So there's a really clear connection between what LEO companies can do and what's missing in the world. And I think that's driving both the technology innovation, it's driving the business focus, and it's certainly attracting a lot of investment. So that's what I would add first.
Thank you, Patricia. Jerry, can you give us your thoughts on LEO systems and what they offer?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for inviting me here today. So clearly we're seeing a real uptick in the demand for, let's say, higher performance, lower latency broadband capability, not just to consumer base, but also to the enterprise writ large. And so folks want to really better appreciate how can they be connected in disparate locations. So rural connectivity is important, international connectivity is important, unilateral connectivity where information comes up out of one region of the world and can be dropped into another region of the world is important. So you're leveraging at Telesat using OISL and optical intersatellite links to achieve that new mesh backbone, if you will, in space versus just a fiber backbone that's on the ground, helps extend that capability of the internet, as Patricia talked about, and bring that connectivity to folks who don't really have it today, and or leverage it in a much more broader way to be more successful at what they do, and achieve, let's say, the same, experiences you're having with a wire connection.
Thanks, Jerry. And Chris, can you talk about OneWeb's view and your view of what LEO constellations bring to the world?
Well, first, let me say I'm still smiling over that BBC program. It was great fun, and it's lovely to see you and everybody today, and Patricia as well. I can't tell you, Patricia, how delighted I am that you're not at SpaceX anymore. I'm absolutely thrilled, and I hope that we'll be able to share some war stories along the way. So forgive me, everybody, for talking shop there. Look, what a transformation. LEO is now part of the woven fabric of the space industry. It's become real. It's there. It's able to be thought of as a provider. SpaceX have done a great job. OneWeb's come back from the dead. Other operators are there, not least the Chinese, who are offering to put up 10,000, but not quite telling us how they're going to do it at the moment. And of course, the Russians want to as well. Everybody wants a LEO. Even Europe wants a LEO. The world is thinking about LEO, but actually, LEO is just part of the total mesh. As Jerry was saying, we need MEO, we need GEO, we probably need HEO. Our customers, our users, just want connectivity. They don't really care where it's coming from. So where latency is an issue, they're going to want a LEO. Where a fat pipe is what they want, they're going to look to GEO and elsewhere. Where GPS from Galileo I needed to be looking in the MEO area. So space has now become a utility area for the globe. It brings great new opportunity to understand the world we live in, and great new opportunity for everyone to be better connected. And as speakers have said already, goodness me, over the last year a bit, we've had a masterclass in just how important it is that we're all connected up. So I'm feeling quite bullish that LEO has finally come of age, and I'm feeling that operators in general are going to see it as part of the general mix that's required for the future. And I think as we look to the future of the space industry, we're not going to be talking about where the satellites are in space anymore. We're just going to be talking about how much bandwidth does it offer me, what can it do, and what applications can I bolt onto it. Thank you.
That is, so we've talked about ubiquity, we've talked about resilience, we've talked about the adaptability of the capability. So let's talk about the competitive landscape. Dylan just very eloquently summarized some of the challenges of space businesses that each of you is very familiar with. The challenges to liquidity, the capital intensivity, the long time frames, the demands of technology innovation, and the early stage performance. So what are LEO constellations? Who are they competing with? Are they competing with geosystems? Are they competing with terrestrial telecom operators? And Jerry, as you sit in both the LEO and the GEO worlds, maybe I'll put you on the spot and ask you to kick us off on that.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I think it's complementary, right? As we look at the GEO business that we're currently in today, that's not going to go away, right? There are services that GEO, as mentioned earlier, are still important to deliver to its user base. If you think about the multicasting, direct-to-home type of TV services, right? That's still not going to go away from a GEO application. But when you migrate now towards LEO, clearly it's trying to achieve the same experience you're going to have through a fiber connectivity. Folks who don't necessarily have the fiber connectivity will be engaged in that area. If you think about ships that pass across the ocean, they're living off of lifeline type of connectivities. Now they'll be able to really achieve broadband connectivities. Oil and gas that sits out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico will now achieve broadband capabilities that they were not necessarily benefiting from today. So I think there's a mix. All regimes matter. To your point that you mentioned earlier, resiliency matters to multiple sets of users, so that there's always a failover, if you will, from a LEO maybe to a MEO or to a GEO. So commonality of capability is important from a terminal perspective. So that's another piece that we have to kind of layer into this storyline. It's not just the space application, but how that can be used by the user across multiple regimes, so that they always have a means to connect and have a way to communicate and have the data flow and information they need. So I think there's a complementary scenario here. I'm not sure it's competitive. It's a competition per se. It's just really a matter of provide the connectivity, and I think, as mentioned earlier, once you have that, how it's delivered to the user is not necessarily going to matter. It's going to be more driven by the capabilities you're looking to achieve and services trying to obtain.
Thanks, Jerry. Chris, OneWeb is evaluating its future capability pathway in association with its new investors and looking at the current environment. So, from that perspective, what's the competitive arena that you're focused on and that you see as important?
Well, I think probably the best thing to say is, although the Chapter 11 was a very painful experience for a lot of people and was a very worrying experience, I'm so personally delighted that we no longer have 3.4 billion of additional debt sitting on us. It's gone. I look at the economics of what we've got, and what I see now, just a year on from where we were, as I used to say, the abandoned orphan of satellite in March last year, waiting for somebody to come and drive up to the orphanage and do something with us. I see us now as the slightly more attractive, gangly kid that is looking hopefully out of a window, having been picked up by, if not Daddy Warbucks, then at least has given us some degree of hope in the form of the British government and other investors, Eutelsat and others. And what I see is a company that's got 2.4 billion of all equity investment and no debt. And so for the first time, I can see a pathway to us of, as Sunil Bharti Mittal likes to say, every dollar going to the bottom line. The first time I can see a model that says, so OneWeb has got its funding for Gen 1. It gets done. It'll be done by the middle of next year. It'll be over and done with. And now for the first time, less than a year after we came back in November last year, we're already looking at, wondering, what is Gen 2? What should it be? How should it perform? When should we do it? So the whole innovation cycle has kicked in, and our chairman, again, being from the mobile industry, he laughs and smiles occasionally ruefully, and he says, when I bought 2G, I thought that I'd bought the solution, and then they told me about 3G, and when I bought 3G, I thought I'd bought the solution, and they told me about 4, and now I'm buying 5, and I'm spending 14 billion around the globe to keep up, and someone tells me there's 6G coming. So I think he's got a much more mobile phone industry attitude towards where we're going and what we're doing. He's much more realistic. And I think one of the most fascinating things has been how his telco team and others really don't buy this is space and it's different anymore. It's just simply telecoms. And in many ways, a lot of the telecoms industries that pulled out of satellite a couple of 20 years ago are now going to be looking and saying, well, what is the cheapest way to connect up our backhaul? How should we be involving ourselves here? Maybe we should have been involved in space all along, and certainly now maybe we should be involved in space. You know, what can we do with Telesat? What can we do with SpaceX? What can we do with OneWeb that it helps us save money? And I suspect that part of the equation about where we're going to go forward will be, so show me how it's cheaper. And in that very telco way, if we can all show them how it's cheaper, we will have a part in the broader telecoms infrastructure, if that makes a degree of sense.
So Jerry talked about an integrated LEO GEO architecture and being able to offer an array of services in a somewhat integrated fashion to customers. Chris, with a very poignant orphan metaphor, talked about a frame of reference that says this is, if I can use the term, a utility that can fit into other utility, the performance of other utilities. And the question is, where's it cheaper? That price could be a driver in terms of competition, even with terrestrial providers. Patricia, you led the Satellite Industry Association in the US. You've worked with satellite operators internationally. You've got hands-on experience inside Starlink. How do you view the competitive landscape?
Sorry, I didn't do that. But across the LEOs, there are very different business targets. Some are looking at more mobility. Some are looking at business networks. Some are looking at cell networks. Some are looking at consumer, and that mix may result in some head-to-head competition across the LEOs. I think Jerry's right that there's a great deal of complementary overlap with GEOs. GEOs overwhelmingly are a great delivery method for video. I don't think that's going to be the case for LEO constellations. I think we'll see a lot of competition for mobility and for small business and maybe business networks. The place that I really would encourage maybe a little more focus is to pick up on the theme that Chris had said, that it really doesn't matter whether it's a space platform or a terrestrial platform. I think that's true in most cases, but I am really intrigued to see where the pie gets bigger, where there are new services that aren't currently being satisfied by any technology, but there may be a requirement where satellite can step in and expand the universe of services delivered. One example, precision agriculture, where you've got large tracts of land and a definite quantifiable value for being able to utilize, gather, and process data on the entire operation. And that's poorly served by most existing technologies. I think LEO has an interesting opportunity there. There are other sectors where the space-based platform and the extraordinary drives in technology innovation that the LEO companies are investing in, I think can create new categories. And then we won't be talking about competition with each other and, kind of elbowing each other out of the same old dish. We're going to be looking at new things.
Well, and that's the innovation win, right? A much bigger pie that creates entirely new business opportunities. So you are all spending your professional lives in this arena. Let's talk about the good and the bad. What are some of the big successes to date for organizations you've worked with or broadly looking at LEO constellations? And what are the challenges? What are the really big hurdles that you see coming up? And Chris, maybe you could kick us off there.
I'm so glad you gave me the opportunity to leap in there. Thanks. The biggest single thing, I think, is that unsung terror of the chip shortage out there in the world at the moment. When you're making as many satellites as we LEO folk are aiming to do at the moment, it's not just Mercedes-Benz that's a bit worried about where the chipsets are. It's us. I think that the supply chain has taken quite a battering with COVID. I think that it's yet to return to full stability. So far, we've been able to keep that momentum going. We've just packaged off another batch of satellites on their way out for a launch. But it's not without its challenges. And in terms of where do we see and what do we think will happen next, I think the answer is going to be that the price per megabyte is going to keep falling. We're in the same place that I saw 20 odd years ago, back in the days when I was inflicting cellular phones on the world. I've been fortunate to launch many of the technologies that are now landfill, but a lot of those technologies at the time were very compelling and whatever, and they all started with a high price, and they all started with high barriers to entry, and they all started with very few people who could actually afford one, and each one in turn has ended up with either becoming obsolete, like the compact disc player, or the mobile phone available to everyone in high volume, but not much pricing capability there. And more importantly, the network providers have ended up struggling to find ways to get people to pay for the network and for the upgrade and for all the work that needs to be done, because instead it's the app people and the Apples of this world and others that have gone downstream and actually got the value. So one of the challenges for us all will be not to build a better water system in space and then look back and find that it's the people that sold the soft drinks connected to the water system that made the money. And so for all of us, one of the challenges is going to be not just innovating, but bringing the costs down, but trying to keep some sort of pricing capability. I mean, the days, Jerry will know, and Patricia as well, and I did 14 years at Inmarsat. So those days of a 60% margin, those days of, oh, you want it for, oh, I think we could do it for $1,600 a megabit. You're really pushing me on that one. Those conversations are gone. And that wonderful comfort, of, oh, great, there's going to be a war. Let's all hike our prices up as fast as we possibly can. What we're going to find is that, please God, there aren't going to be any more big wars, but what we're going to find is that when that happens, there will be so much capacity from so many different options chasing and, like Shrek's donkey shouting, pick me, because the availability of connectivity in a ubiquitous way is us all chasing down. So for the big expensive LEOs, yesterday our shareholder Eutelsat was launching the last of its big batch of Connect satellites that, as they told me, they designed 6 years ago. So I said, oh, so it's obsolete already then? And they were sort of, yeah, thanks, Chris. And then they told me, well, yeah, it's just the way things are going. We're going to have newer satellites coming on stream faster with ever more power, with more output, which will be challenging the price point of the existing networks and challenging the price point of what we can do. Now, to Jerry's point, you can't beat a good geo for a nice, big, solid pipe for information. But I'm not sure, I don't know what our customers are going to want to pay for it and what the end users, are they just a generation that just thinks Wi-Fi is always there? and we all end up just chasing this treadmill of putting more in. But I'd love to hear from others on their thoughts there.
So near-term chip shortage, longer-term business case challenge around capturing value, and that whole question of value-added services is sort of fundamental to the economics of the satellite ecosystem. Direct-to-home television has been the largest market, the largest satellite market for a long time because of the integration of space assets with value-added programming and so on. So that's a really interesting point. Patricia, what is your take on the successes to date and challenges going forward?
I really appreciated the points that Chris made. I want to pick up on one of them, which is we are building enormous infrastructure with first-of-breed technology, and I think the cycle of innovation is moving very, very fast right now. We're really seeing an acceleration of new ideas. But we haven't talked about what's driving it from a service perspective. And I think that's one of the great unknowns and also one of the great triumphs of the satellite industry generally in history, which is to adapt to emerging new services. I challenge anyone to think how they used the internet 5 years ago and contrast it to how you use it now. And we're building satellites that last 5 to 10 years. What are they going to be needed for in 5 years? I think we're going to see Internet of Things. We're going to see more mobility applications. I think we'll see more sensing, more sort of data-driven applications, but I don't really know. So part of the challenge for these operators today is going to be adaptable and make sure that the infrastructure they're building either can be refreshed quickly or can be retrofitted to keep up with what's being demanded. We don't know that right now, what's being demanded. And I think the satellite industry in general has been really successful in reusing space-based infrastructure that lasts 15, 20 years, even though the underlying services cycle so quickly. The other thing I would say is there's a great value in this confluence of money and inspiration and industrial application right now. I think it's spitting out ideas and capabilities that can be fielded quickly because of better launch access and can be integrated quickly because you've got quite a lot of capital chasing space projects right now. And that's one of the things that I like best about the space industry. I like to say that the line between crazy and brilliant is really thin. And I think you're going to see a lot of crazy/brilliant ideas. We'll need a couple of years to figure out which ones are which. I'm pleased to have worked at one that people thought was crazy and turns out, so far looking a little bit less so. So I think that's another exciting challenge or exciting piece of this. The challenge that I would bring from my own perspective is that almost all of these projects and almost all this technology and almost all the services somewhere come up against government regulations and rules. And government regulations and rules are slow. They sometimes are overly specific, and they sometimes don't fit not just the technology or the project, but they don't sometimes fit the end goal as that continues to evolve. So I think there's going to be an ongoing tension between a fast-moving industry that has crazy, brilliant ideas and the capital to pursue them, and the governments that want to make sure that they're setting out the right competitive rules, the right incentives, and the right frameworks for it. So you don't have to be an engineer to play in this world. You can be a policy geek.
I've often said that one of the great joys of my professional life is the passion that people in the space industry have for their business, and that passion can edge over to obsession. So I think the brilliant, crazy conundrum fits right in there. The idea. So Patricia's talked about the idea that enabling technology will result in almost user-driven innovation in terms of applications and uses. I think that idea of what were you doing with the internet 5 years ago is very compelling. Jerry, what do you see as the successes to date and the big challenges coming up?
Sure. And I think Chris and Patricia kind of hit on a couple of key points, right? Supply chain in today's world is clearly important, as we're seeing with, disasters happening in Germany today that has influenced many things to date, as well as they are a major supplier in the space business. But that's important, right? We need to make sure that as we're building, I'll say, commoditized products, that supply chain is being built on a just-in-time type of inventory process, so we can, if you will, push out products on a very rapid, sequential basis that's really leveraging. Let's look at the auto industry as the means by which they've really produced products on a mass scale, and we're looking at develop now satellites that used to be handcrafted, onesie, twosie scenarios. We're now pushing them out in a manner that is very much similar with high reliability, high performance, high capability that we've seen out of the auto industry. So leveraging those two technologies, those two industries to create a process, if you will, that what Patricia was pointing out, how you bring these products to table is really important. But I also want to draw upon a couple points too, is standardization. I think Chris was talking this when he talks about his iPhone analogies, are key, or cell phone analogies, are key to understand how we can bring new applications, new solutions, and new ideas to be leveraged and used by multiple people who are not necessarily in the industry, but see ways by which they can then influence the industry as well. So that's an important piece. And part of that also is open architectures. Pull on Patricia's thread. Now, back in the days, I worked on a satellite, the Intelsat 6s, that were built in the 1990s, well in advance of the internet. Those satellites transcended 25 years and still were providing internet capability and connectivity at a time when they were not even considered and envisioned. So there is a lot of opportunity in taking and putting together the right solutions today that can be adopted and adapted to tomorrow. So that's part of that open standard and open architecture idea. So if we put those in place, success in the future is, I wouldn't say assured, but it's a higher probability.
Thanks, Jerry. So let's move on to the question that is maybe the most aligned with this group's day-to-day work and expertise. And Patricia foreshadowed this for us, which is, how does government fit in to LEO constellations? And Patricia, since you opened the door, do you want to walk us through it and give us some more insight into that?
Yeah, so government is an enabler in the sense that they certainly have been increasingly active in investing in potential technologies for LEO constellations. I think the national security world has increased its intrigue with how diffused constellations can support their activities. And so they're investing in ground technology and space concepts that could support direct national security applications. But we're also seeing in other technology areas a great deal of interest from federal agencies, international agencies that are end user segments. Again, I mentioned agriculture. I would say the same thing for emergency preparedness, for development issues. We're seeing those end user groups reach out and confirm. Education is another, certainly, and medicine, confirming that they, as government fueled sectors, are potential customers. It's encouraging then to build services, applications, equipment for those end user groups in a more direct way than I think the satellite industry has approached in the past. I think in general, so almost all these activities need to be authorized. Launches need to be authorized. You need to have a structure to be able to do that. The satellite spacecraft themselves need to be licensed. The spectrum needs to be adjudicated. The services need to be approved in every individual country. The equipment needs to be certified. There's a million different layers of this stuff. And each one of them has its own quirky, antiquated complexity. I think one thing I would say that's really notable in the last decade is the overwhelming interest by governments for the end outcome. We need more broadband. So I'm going to consider revamping these crazy old rules that I haven't looked at in 10 years because I want my citizens to be able to have better connectivity, or I need this industry to have it. So that regulatory and licensing field can be quite daunting, but there's a great deal of interest and willingness because the outcome is so valued right now.
So enabler, regulator, and enthusiastic participant in delivering ubiquitous access. Jerry, Telesat has been right in the middle of that, some of those challenges. How does government fit in from your point of view?
Well, I don't think it does actually fit directly in. I mean, as Patricia highlighted, they're looking at capabilities-based solutions, not necessarily the answer, but how can they leverage, how can they exploit, how can they use commercial capabilities in it for a military utility. And so really the intent there is try to map what we do from a commercial perspective and apply that into a military utility perspective, because there is overlaps, and find those areas of overlap and leverage them. Where can LEO capabilities provide either better solutions than what they're achieving today in the MEO and GEO world, or not, right? And you have to make those lines of distinction. You can't just focus that it's going to be an all-encompassing, because it's not. But there is the areas to look at how can the government achieve, in disparate locations around the world, that they can achieve the same type of data rates they're used to and need to continue on with their mission sets that they're trying to achieve, whether it be embassies, whether it be forward operating bases, whether it be training exercises around the globe. All this allows for that communication link to be continued. And we're seeing the government is really driving that. We see folks like the Space Development Agency. We see folks like Patricia's team out in the Space Force doing important business to realize that these are areas where we need to focus. These are areas we need to be aware of. And these are areas we need to be participatory in. And so they help seeding those conversations to make sure that we as Telesat can ensure that when we roll out our constellation, it has features and capabilities like security, like operations OPSEC, so that they are comfortable using our systems as well, and not necessarily looking at the commercial is not safe, so to speak, to use those phrases, but it's more that it's already a trusted partner within the fabric of what they want to achieve. So that's an important piece, to build that into the constellation and build it into the network so that it's already considered in the conversation and not as an afterthought or a band-aid after the fact. So we see that as an important piece on our end as we move forward.
So government as an overseer and regulator, and government as a partner. And Chris, that's a beautiful segue to you, because you are working with government as a partner in a very direct and specific way. So from OneWeb's standpoint, your standpoint, how does government fit in? And if you could take us home.
We obviously absolutely love government. We think they're incredible. We think they're tremendous. We're very mindful that they owned 50% of us and they still own 20% of us. It was a fascinating process because on the one hand, government could see and wanted what OneWeb could do. But on the other hand, had absolutely no idea how it was going to do it and wasn't sure it was allowed even to be able to do it. And there were a lot of civil servants who said, oh, no, we don't pick winners and we don't do this. And we were able to say, well, it's not about picking winners. There are only 2 operators in the world at the moment, and one of them is going to go somewhere else if you don't have it. Now, if you want the Chinese to have it, that's fine. If you want the Canadians to have it, that's fine too. But if you want the French and the Europeans to have it just after Brexit, that may not be fine, but it's up to you. Now, I'm being slightly jokey to get the emphasis over. At the operational level, at the government and intelligence level, we get it, we want it, we got to have it. At the operational departments of state level, don't bring it in my budget, don't bring it in my direction, don't take the money out of my pot. That then swings over about a year to, what can I do with it? How can I apply it? I still don't want to spend any money, but can I now take advantage of this? And so what we're seeing at government level is, so you could do something for smart motorways for us, could you? You could do something for our aid and trade engagement. You could possibly provide us with a resilient PNT backup to the challenges we've got there. can you do anything for us on maritime? Is it possible that you could do so? And on it goes. And so we're now at the new shopping list, and I know Jerry and Patricia will be way ahead of me on this one. We're at the new shopping list stage where people say, well, not that I want anything at the moment, which is where they always start. But if we were to want X, Y, or Z, what could you do for us? And so I think we've all seen this, and we all know that they come with a shopping list with no intention to buy. They kick the tires, they look at it for quite a while, and then they really, really actually alight on one thing or on two things. And so I think what we're going to see is the government saying, we'll do all these things. Now, onto the regulatory side of things, we have a different set of challenges. I mean, for example, the British government has an avowed desire to launch more satellites from Britain. Good thing, should do it. However, the policy that's emerging is one of unlimited liability, so there won't be any more launches in Britain, although there might be because maybe things will get changed or whatever. So you've got policy aims and goals that trip over each other along the way. Sorry. So in short, we love government. We love regulatory when it works well. We don't see enough flexibility in that, but we would hope that we can all work together and still be talking in 5 years' time about how all our satellites are working together.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, panelists. I can't tell you what an absolute joy it is to talk about the business of LEO constellations at this, increasingly mature phase of operations. I also want to thank the audience for being with us today, and to just remind everyone that one of the reasons we're here today, so many of us associated with Future Space Leaders, all of the future space leaders that have been awarded recognition, is because Clay came up with this idea how many years ago and enlisted a whole bunch of us to participate and help. So always a pleasure to share the stage with you, Clay, and back to you.
Thanks, Carissa, Patricia, Gerald, and Chris for that wicked cool panel. Great beer to Zeus. I mean, Jerry Jansen dropping a reference to Intelsat 6. I did not see that coming. These mega constellations are fundamentally changing satellite communications, and I know for me, I'm excited to see what comes next. So speaking of next, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Advanced Space, to see what they're up to. Our final panel discussion will cover space sustainability and what is shaping up to be a commercial presence in low Earth orbit and on the moon. Welcoming back our Future Space board member, Jackie Cortese from Blue Origin, to moderate this session, named Foundations, Building a Sustainable Presence in Space. Over to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Clay. I'm really excited about this panel. Everyone on this panel makes me feel supremely unaccomplished, so there's that, which is great. But I'm so excited to first and foremost introduce my panelists, John Caloris, Dr. Cameron Meek, and Ellie Morgan. I will introduce them all briefly, turn it over to them for a minute or two of remarks about all the amazing things they're each doing, and then we'll get to some questions. So First off, not that I'm biased, I'm excited to introduce my friend and colleague, John Cloris. John is Vice President of Advanced Development Programs for Blue Origin, where he leads lunar development. Prior to Blue Origin, John was the co-founder and Chief Technology Officer at Reliable Robotics, as well as the Chief Technology Officer at Azul Airlines. John has a long history in commercial space that began at SpaceX, where he was a mission director, followed by Virgin Orbit, where he was head of launch systems. John holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree in aerospace engineering from RPI. And if that all isn't enough, John also served as a pilot and commander in the United States Navy and has excellent taste in cocktails. So John, I will turn it over to you for a couple minutes about what you're working on at Blue and how sustainability plays a role at that.
Thank you, Jackie. So thank you for having me here today. We are working at Blue Origin on our lunar architecture. The moon is such a critical part of humanity's eventual stepping off this planet and making ourselves truly a multi-planetary society where millions of people are working and living in space. And sustainability for us is more than just reusability. Reusability is critically important. You've heard the adage, you don't throw away a 737 after its first flight, you want to reuse it. But we look at the entire mission profile, and that's really the newest part of this lunar architecture is how can we utilize resources in place? How can we utilize each node on that profile? So for example, our lunar architecture utilizes liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, two materials that can be found on the moon that can be processed into propellants for our vehicle. But it goes beyond that. It's once we're there, how do we generate power not only in daylight, but in shadowed regions of the moon? So we look to, can we utilize these same resources to generate power? We have a regenerative fuel cell system, for example, that utilizes lunar resources and recharges itself during the daylight. So we have solar power doing recharging. So again, it's kind of broad-based, looking across the entire profile. How can we ensure humanity's permanent presence going to the moon and then going beyond?
Thank you, John. Next up, Dr. Cameron Meek, who has more than 28 years of experience with an extensive background pioneering in the areas of dynamics, estimation, and control. Currently with Advanced Space, one of our sponsors, thank you. Prior to joining Advanced Space as Director of Flight Dynamics, he served as Director of Flight Dynamics Engineering at OneWeb, where he built a team of over 30 and led their development of all required operational systems and procedures from scratch to support OneWeb's constellation of satellites. Cameron earned his PhD with a dissertation focused on automated operational orbit determination. Wow, okay, that's incredible. Led development of the flight dynamics system for the Cygnus ISS resupply vehicle, served on the navigation team for Cassini, and worked on numerous other missions during his 28-year career. I don't know where he found the time, but I will pass it over to Dr. Cameron.
Well, thank you, Jackie. I'm very excited to be joining you today, particularly to share about this topic. As you said, I'm the Director of Flight Dynamics at Advanced Space, where I lead a team specializing in dynamics estimation and control to support the sustainable exploration, development, and settlement of space. Also, as you mentioned, prior to joining Advanced Space, my experience was with JPL, OneWeb, and other aerospace companies, where I led the development of a satellite constellation, as well as worked on many missions across various space domains. At Advanced Space, we are leading the Capstone mission, which will fly to the moon later this year on a dedicated launch and will demonstrate peer-to-peer navigation using spacecraft crosslinks, while also demonstrating operations to inform NASA's Artemis program. As it relates to sustainability, we are executing this mission with a very agile and dynamic partnership with NASA and building technologies that will be required by safe and sustainable cislunar operations in the future. Our primary focus with this work is on knowing where things are at the moon and throughout space. Traditionally, this is done with ground-based measurements. However, our cislunar autonomous positioning system, or CAPS, will do this with peer-to-peer measurements and additional data types in the future. How does building a sustainable presence in space apply to the Capstone mission itself? This is a mission funded by NASA, led by Advanced Space, and supported by a variety of mission partners, including Tyvak nanosatellite systems, stellar exploration, Rocket Lab, and a variety of NASA centers. The mission will launch a 12U CubeSat on a dedicated Rocket Lab launch. It will utilize a highly efficient ballistic transfer to the moon, which takes approximately 3 months, and will arrive into a near rectilinear halo orbit, or NRHO, that is identical to the orbit plan for NASA's Gateway. While demonstrating operations in this highly dynamic regime, we will also perform cross-link ranging with NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter as a demonstration that will enable future autonomous Earth-independent navigation. Beyond this mission, our team works with NASA and other customers to efficiently plan and execute flight dynamics for applications ranging from LEO constellations to interplanetary missions to Venus and Mars. We also work on developing the technologies required for future missions and operations, including work in the areas of automation and machine learning. We do exciting work at Advanced Space and believe in innovative solutions. We continue to grow through our internship program, where some of our interns have joined our team, and through employing top talent in the industry. So for us at Advanced Space, sustainability is motivated by why the company was started 10 plus years ago, and our vision to support the sustainable exploration, development, and settlement of space is what drives what we do in terms of building technologies to scale for the future. And it drives how we do these things in terms of forming deep relationships with our customers and partners that share risk and are focused on long-term mission success. Again, thank you for inviting me to join you today. I look forward to discussing this as we go through your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Meek. Last but certainly not least, a total rock star. Ellie Morgan currently serves as the Habitation Program Manager for Lockheed Martin's Advanced Programs Division, where she oversees development and mission architecture for future expeditions to the Moon and Mars. Coolest job ever. Prior to her current position, she led Lockheed's crewed mobility vehicle development for the lunar surface. Prior to joining Lockheed Martin, she led systems engineering and crew systems development at Bigelow Aerospace and conducted human spaceflight research at NASA Johnson as part of their HERA program. Ellie served in the Air Force on active duty for 12 years as a pilot, and she continues to serve in the Air Force Reserves. She's a 2006 graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy and holds a bachelor's degree in systems engineering and a master's degree in space studies. Looking forward to hearing from Ellie.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie, and thanks everyone for having me here today. Exciting to talk to you all. Wonderful comments already from Cameron and John. Definitely echoing a lot of those sentiments as well. And very similar to what John was talking about. A lot of my role, as Jackie mentioned right now, is focusing on our habitation structures and the mission architecture surrounding that. And very similar to Blue Origin, Lockheed Martin, we're also looking to help expand human presence beyond low Earth orbit, and really what is it going to take to get humans back to the moon, and then our ultimate goal onto Mars. And a huge part of that with people is habitation. And so part of that, habitation, and then also some of the previous work I did on mobility, which is also a very important part of the architecture. Also is reusability. I much echo that sentiment from the others. But when we talk about reusability, there's also, I would say, other aspects to that too that we're also focusing on, which is the importance of a resilient architecture. We need to build architectures. What we're looking into is, architectures that are flexible, adaptable, and evolvable over time. Things that we can upgrade and grow, as our needs evolve, and that's really important. We know it's expensive to get things to the moon or anywhere beyond that, so we want to make sure we don't have to build new structures every time, and it can grow as our needs change. Part of it also. With that is in situ resource utilization, which was also discussed, and really looking into that whole in-space manufacturing and assembly, and what can we do, how can we use the environment around us, lunar regolith, many applications for that. And then also we want to be good stewards of the environment. We are also looking into environmentally friendly fuels, and we share a vision as well for a water-based economy versus one based on fossil fuels in space. And then last but not least, I think the other thing I'll add, which folks may not think about as much when we talk about sustainability, but I think is really important to talk about as we are starting to expand with a commercial space industry. Really, sustainability is also, how can we keep this as a viable business option? NASA has fewer funds now. NASA is focused on exploration. And so if we want to grow our private and commercial space industry, that's a really important factor. So I think part of the sustainability that we're looking into is, hey, what types of, customers do we have? What are viable business plans? How can we still make a profit, but how can we be cost effective? And that's a really important element that we're looking at, and that's important for us as a big company, and that's a challenge, but we're excited for the challenge and to start innovating. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and thank you all again for being here. This is such an exciting panel. I know you each mentioned different ways in which current projects you're working on incorporate sustainability. And I think, we've mentioned a wide range of different projects, from small sats to landers to crewed habitation vehicles. And obviously sustainability is critical in each of these different types of spacecraft, but they're obviously all very different. So I think I would say, in your view, what is sort of the critical components of sustainability across all of these different types of spacecraft that make operating in space and making sure that we're sustainable? How do we do that across these different types of spacecrafts, and what ties that all together? So I'll kick it over. I think Dr. Meek mentioned, some of the small sat activity. Would love to hear a little bit more of that from you.
Well, we can't do this alone, right? We need partnerships, and partnerships are key to maximizing the sustainability of space activities. We work on software and operations, not hardware. We focus on enabling our customers' missions through solutions and we rapidly and efficiently provide. And we deliver those solutions that support and improve space mission planning and execution through our subject matter expertise. So we kind of look at this as we need a lot of different companies and solutions, to make this sustainable. We're only part of the solution. And we need partners in overall industrial growth. And so, all of those things you mentioned combined need to come together to contribute to the sustainability.
Absolutely. And as a follow-up question, I think, one of those partners, and I know Ellie mentioned this, one of those partners is the government. And in your view, or, as space professionals, what are the gaps in terms of sustainability, and where could the government play a role? I'll kick it over to Ellie for some initial thoughts, but open to anyone to answer that one.
Ellie, you're muted.
There we go. Great question, Jackie. And I would say probably one of the main things that would be, how they play a role and what would be helpful. The government, they require corporate investment in most of the acquisitions that we do. And, in order for that to be successful, the government, they really are going to need to minimize some of the restrictions and allow companies to start making profit in creative ways. I think additionally, the government is also going to need to open its aperture as to what constitutes corporate contribution. And I think ultimately that's going to allow, maximum competition.
Totally agree. John, any thoughts on that same question along that line?
Yeah, thanks. Again, echoing what Ellie said, what we need is to be a true partnership. So commercial space couldn't exist without NASA and without government help, and vice versa. We are together growing LEO, expanding our presence to the moon and then to Mars and beyond. So it really is a partnership, and we need to keep working that way. Specific to sustainability, though, I'd like to make sure people understand that it goes beyond technology and engineering, and it goes towards the excitement of humanity, of what we're trying to do. Apollo 11 occurred over 50 years ago, and since then, the idea of going to the moon has lost a lot of interest in the public mind, and now it's coming back. And the reason it's coming back is because there's competition in the space industry. And we need to work together with government to keep that excitement and grow that in the next generation, so that when we all retire, there are even more engineers and managers and people who will take us beyond Mars and continue on. And that's really what sustainability is to me. It's beyond just the technology and engineering. It's how do we make sure future generations are excited and want to expand humanity.
That's an amazing point, John. I actually personally had not thought about that in terms of sustainability. That's an excellent point. Cameron, anything you'd like to add to this topic about gaps in government involvement in sustainability?
A little bit, yes, thanks. I mean, we think that the most important big picture thing the government can do is to be a good customer. The U.S. government has the unique advantage of an incredibly dynamic and robust and evolving industrial base. And if the government's able to utilize these partners in a constructive way, then the sustainability of space exploration, development, and settlement will be maximized. So the focus should be on leveraging the unique benefits that both government and industry can bring to the table.
Absolutely. Okay. Now we're going to fast forward to the future, to the year 2050, which I guess really doesn't seem that far away now that it's 2021. But in 2050, we have bustling activity on the moon. We have a very proliferated orbit, full of small sats, large sats, all types of sats. We have frequent, space tourism activities, and hopefully we're on our way, if not already at Mars. I know Congressman Perlmutter would tell me we will have already been long at Mars. But in this future reality, what in you all's view is, a sustainability issue that we're facing now that we need to start addressing now so that this 2050 future can happen and can be successful? What are your thoughts on that? I'll kick it over to John first.
Thanks, Jackie. So what's critically important is that we get moving now, that we stop kind of studying and reevaluating, and we get to the moon, in my opinion right now, the moon now, so we can learn what we need for a sustainable presence. It goes beyond what we feel we need. Once we actually get days and months and years on the lunar surface and on any planetary body, we're going to learn things that we just didn't know right now or didn't occur to us that we need for a sustainable presence. So we need to get moving now. We need to continue our government and commercial space collaboration. Things such as the incredible help we've received from numerous NASA centers on our cryogenic fluid management. I keep harping on that, but that is the core to our propellants. That's our core to be able to stay in the cislunar environment and go beyond. And so continuing that presence, continuing that partnership, and let's get moving, honestly.
Great, absolutely. Ellie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything John said. And additionally, I think when we kind of look back as well, when we talk about these sustainable, resilient architectures, what we're going to learn on the moon to prepare us for Mars, I think also it's going to be extremely useful for us to parlay a lot of those lessons learned just here on Earth as we see everything happening with climate change and storms and fires and the world changing. I think we will take a cue and we'll be grateful to be able to share a lot of these, sustainability efforts. And, and I'll add on to, I'm sure Cameron will probably talk about it as well, but, let's make sure that we're addressing orbital debris. Now, we know that's a huge issue and it's only going to get worse. And, I think that's an important thing that hopefully, as we are addressing now, we'll look back on in years to come, and we'll be grateful for that. So we're not stuck on Earth, and we'll be off of it.
I'm very much looking forward to that day when frequent trips to the moon will just be casual. So completely agree with you both. Cameron?
Sure, I totally agree with my other panelists, and let's get moving now and learn the things that we don't know and push forward and figure them out. That's how we advance is by trying things and innovating, find out what works and doesn't work, and move forward. A few additional comments. At Advanced Space, we feel that specialization of functions that allow for the industry to scale is very important and something that we think will be beneficial and that we'd be happy if we did in the year 2050. Just like other technologies, focused industries, the ability for companies to specialize and scale will enable the industry to be sustainable. And when we look at the technical challenges for sustainability, we feel strongly that providing systems at the moon, such as a GPS-like system at the moon, would be critical for infrastructure. Similar to John's talking about their fuel technology and that sort of thing. having a system to provide that Earth-independent ability to navigate at the moon will be critical. So we definitely think that infrastructure and providing a sustainable infrastructure is the key to future space activities and to really allowing humans to settle into the solar system.
All great points, thank you. Now, I think, John mentioned this a little bit, but sustainability of space exploration has to go beyond just the space industry bubble. It has to go into adjacent industries, non-traditional industries. It's a lot bigger than that. And I think Ellie made the great point about, you can't always just rely on the government. There has to be other customers, other parties. Have you all in your careers, it doesn't have to necessarily be your current role, but where have you found sort of, the huge benefits of expanding, the space aperture beyond just the bubble of the space industry in terms of, making space exploration more sustainable, whether that be a non-traditional customer, whether that be, a technology perhaps from a different field that you were able to bring into something that you were working on. I think that's an important part of sustainability. I'm not sure if anyone has any examples of that, but Ellie, would you care to share anything?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point, Jackie. One of the projects that I was leading up until recently was our lunar surface mobility that we talked about. And, we had a major partnership with General Motors, which is continuing on. And that was a really fabulous endeavor, looking across industry lines and working with the automotive industry and really getting to see, what can we leverage and what are lessons learned and technologies on Earth that we're using, specifically in terms of automation and driving and other elements of vehicles, that we're going to look at on the lunar surface and then maybe on Mars later. But yeah, that was kind of a really interesting interdisciplinary way to bring folks together outside the space industry and really learn from each other. And I think one of my favorite quotes has always been, if you want to go quickly, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think, as John and Cameron have mentioned, that's what we need to do as an industry, not just with our space counterparts, but across other industry lines.
I love that quote. Thank you, Ellie. That's great. That's a really cool project. Cameron, anything from you?
We have worked with a variety. We work with a lot of people, mostly in space, but some things that we work on, we've been doing a lot of work recently in neural networks and that sort of thing, and even looking to other industries and how they apply it, such as natural language processing and how that might be leveraged to help the space industry by having an expert system that understands the vocabulary of aerospace and what it could do to contribute to new innovations and things that could help us with the tasks that we're working on.
Great, thank you. John, anything from your background? I know you have been in a range of commercial space companies as well.
Yes, and it's great, like you mentioned. Of course, customers, both present, perceived future, and customers that we may not even realize would be customers as we open these markets are going to be critically important. I'd also mention that how we design and build spacecraft, we should be looking beyond just aerospace and beyond traditional space providers alone, because that will make all of the space providers even better. I can think of a number of examples of equipment that we used on past spacecraft that didn't necessarily have to come with the millions of dollars of overhead and of development when another industry developed something to even tighter requirements. But like what Ellie was saying, and Cameron mentioned as well, some of the aerospace requirements are so tight that it excludes the use of those subcomponents and components. And by being able to show our partners that, no, we can, if we change the requirement, change the design and construction standard, we can still meet the intent and build an even better, safer, and less expensive vehicle. That's really what I think a lot of the future will be. And then from that, as we lower the cost of access to space, more and more markets will open and more customers will come about. Personal experience, besides using going out and purchasing a commercial airliner and modifying it to carry a small satellite launcher, the use of satellite internet on airlines, global coverage, was something that I was very involved in very early on, and pushing that price down, allowing free access to people on these airliners and then in other areas around the world is really going to be an enabler. And again, get more talent into the populace so that we can continue to go to the moon, to Mars and beyond.
Absolutely. Well, for my last question, I know we have a lot of young professionals, maybe some college students watching right now. You all work for some extraordinarily cool companies, Advanced Space, Blue Origin, Lockheed Martin. If you wouldn't mind sharing, whether that be a piece of advice for the young professionals watching right now, what you look for when you're looking to grow your teams at your companies, anything that you would like to share with them, we would really appreciate your insights. So we'll start with Cameron.
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. We definitely look for new talent a lot. As I mentioned, we have a robust internship program and have actually hired many of our interns. What I look for a lot is passion and a willingness to learn. Because people that are passionate will, they will work hard. They will accomplish great things. And then also the willingness to learn, because there's so much to know, right? This is a very broad industry. And as I've mentioned, we can't do this alone. We need partners and that sort of thing, but we also need people. We need people that will learn different disciplines, be open to new ideas, and are flexible to growing and learning. And that's what I would advise new people coming out. Be passionate and have an open mind and willingness to learn.
Thank you, Cameron. I love that point about passion. That's definitely something that can't necessarily teach. So I think that's hugely impactful. Ellie?
Yeah, man, Cameron stole the words out of my mouth. No, but I definitely echo that. And also, Lockheed Martin has a very large intern program, and I actually just sat in on some big presentations I gave yesterday. So it's been really great getting to know some of our interns this summer, and that's been a wonderful experience. And we've been doing some remotely as well and in person, so definitely look into that as well. But in general, I agree. Passion is key, and as Cameron mentioned, being curious and wanting to learn new things. And I swear there's never a day I show up to work that I don't learn something new, and I'm not, challenged. So, I think definitely looking for individuals that are up for a challenge, that want to do something unique and solve hard problems. But most importantly, also, I think, is the importance of being a good team member. And, I think that's really a quality that's going to serve you well in whatever job and throughout your life. Work well with others. Yeah. Be a good team member, and and people will want you on their team. And I definitely look for that when I'm growing a team. People that are selfless and willing to get along together and helpful, and and put the team's needs first. And so, and I think the only other tidbit I'll just toss in is, obviously things are competitive across all of these space companies, but I just want folks to know that, don't ever get discouraged if you don't land the job you want right off the bat, because it's okay to have a winding journey. I mean, mine has been that way as well. And I can honestly say that even the things that wasn't my first choice of things I did along the way throughout my career, I learned really valuable nuggets along the way that actually enabled me to land positions later and, do the job that I have now. So don't ever discount any opportunities you have along the way.
Love that. Thanks, Ellie. And I love your comments on teamwork. I think the space industry has shown that strong teams can achieve almost anything, whether that be landing on Mars multiple times, taking people to and from space safely, and, countless others. So that's a great point. John, anything from Blue? I could probably help too, if you need.
Yeah. So again, echoing that passion for what you do is critically important. And that quest for knowledge, constantly going out and looking to expand your horizons. I've mentioned before, you can see this lunar module above my shoulder here. My dad worked at Grumman on the lunar module program. Like that helped instill that passion in me that now we want to see in the next generation and the next generation, so that learning isn't forced, but it's something you enjoy doing. So that will allow us to push sustainability to the next level. What's important for me, again, echoing that idea of teamwork, and also this isn't a cliche, but when people say asking, well, why not? Why can't something be done? You should do that. You should absolutely do that. And I will give you tangible examples rather than just saying, ask why not. All the way from Elon Musk saying, people telling him you can't land an orbital class, or excuse me, a first stage, and eventually an orbital class booster. He honestly said, why not? You'll always hear like, oh, there's a reason I can't do this, that, or the other. Same with Jeff Bezos. People said, well, you cannot work a cislunar architecture that you try to do all these things. And right now, 2021, 2022, all the way to the 2030s, you're going to see an exciting effort there with Blue Origin. Same with, you cannot fly the first human on a rocket, and we just did that last week. Richard Branson being told you can't have global coverage for a small satellite launcher. And he re-imaged that and said, well, why can't I launch from a rocket or from a commercial airliner? The last one I really like is David Neilman as well. Someone I worked with, he's the founder of JetBlue and founded Azul. Back in 1997, people said to him, you cannot put a TV in the back of an airline seat. Something as simple as that we take for granted today. There were thousands of reasons of why you can't do that. And he said, why not? And each time he picked away at that and created JetBlue, and now created our experience on just about every airliner you go on. So it's across the human experience is my point. Thanks, Jackie.
Well, John, Cameron, Ellie, I can't thank you guys enough for being such awesome panelists, and look forward to seeing what's next in all of your illustrious careers. And thank you for your support of the Future Space Leaders Foundation.
Thanks all.
Awesome.
Thank you so
all.
much for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, John. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks, Ellie. That was a fantastic panel. Really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us for this great event. We're grateful to all of our distinguished panelists that were here today on site and virtually. We're also grateful to our sponsors, Advanced Space, Blue Origin, Bryce Tech, BWXT, the Commercial Space Progress Foundation, ComSpoc, Hogan Lovells, and Virgin Galactic for making this all possible. Let me also offer my personal thanks to the Future Space Leaders volunteers, people like Tara Halt that does our social media, our board of directors, it's an all-volunteer organization, my executive committee, my vice chair, in particular, Brad Cheatham, helps me organize and manage all of these activities, to Sarisha Bandla from Virgin, and others that help make this possible. And also to Yasmin Almond, who's our executive director. It's all your tireless work that makes our programs a success and allows us to keep giving back. So keep volunteering, keep helping with Future Space, and it's really an amazing feedback that we get from our grant award winners. So I'm grateful for all of you for tuning in. Please visit our website, futurespaceleaders.org. You can learn about our new class of grant award winners this year. You can see the replay of this event. And stay tuned for updates on our next events that are coming up. So thanks for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Cheers.
I have one more thing we need to do before we depart. This is called a challenge coin. On the front, it says presented by crew member 7 for spaceflight on New Shepard. On the back, it says you are one of the first of millions of people living and working in space. So with that, the New Shepard 16 crew is go for launch.
Go, Jeff, go, Mark. Oh, wow. This is incredible.
I press it, then
History in the making. I can't believe it. Woo!